Welcome to KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. In May 2019, I made my first keto walnut bread, which was egg-free and dairy-free. So if you're looking for that kind of recipe, please check that one out. This version of the bread was very dense and made for a wonderful accompaniment for stews and other hors d'oeuvres and cheese. However, what I wanted to do was to rejig this recipe in order that we could use it to make sandwiches. In sharing this new keto walnut bread, keto sandwich bread recipe, I hope that you'll find that this bread slices that are still very hearty and go perfectly well with many sandwich fillings. And if you'd like me to make videos suggesting sandwich ideas with their macros, please leave me a comment in the description below. This keto walnut bread has a 1.6 to 1 macronutrient ratio with 6.7 grams of total carbs, with 1.7 grams of soluble fiber, 3.8 grams of insoluble fiber, resulting in only 1.2 grams of net carbs per slice. For this version of the bread, I have also simplified the how to make the bread in order to make it as easy as possible so that everyone, including people who are just new to keto and learning to cook, can make it and be successful. So please watch the entire video because I do provide tips and suggestions as I go. One of the things that I always do before I start any recipe is to always assemble all of my ingredients. This will save you a lot of time of hunting around as you're making the recipe. As well, it's an important way to check that you have all the ingredients before you start. As I stated, this is a really simple recipe. The first thing I do is get my food processor, into which I add all of my dry ingredients. I toss in the walnut halves, the coconut flour, whole psyllium husk, and the gluten-free baking powder and baking soda. If you're new, the reason we use baking powder and baking soda are because these two ingredients are leavening agents and are important in helping to keep a really light, fluffy bread. And the baking soda and baking powder are activated at different times in the baking process. So a complement of these two ensures that you'll have a nice, soft sandwich-style bread. That is, without yeast. Also, if you want me to make a yeast bread, just let me know. I'm quite happy to do things that you guys need and will be helpful to your lifestyle. Now, to get the best texture, after adding all of your dry ingredients, pulse it quite a number of times until your walnuts and other ingredients have been ground to the texture of rough almond meal. You don't need it to be a powder, but you do need it to be quite fine. Also, by putting all the ingredients into the food processor at the same time, you'll find that the other ingredients, as well as the pulsing rather than continuous blending, will prevent the walnuts from clumping or forming a butter. Before continuing, and because the rest of the process will go very quickly, please preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. Also line your loaf pan with parchment paper. As you can see, I have two different shaped loaf pans. They both hold about the same amount of volume, but for this bread, I prefer and I would highly recommend you use this narrower and longer pan to get the best results. I've actually used both pans and from my experience at least, I do prefer the narrower pan. That's because when making a keto, in other words, gluten-free and grain-free bread, I find that this longer pan results in a much better, more evenly baked loaf of bread. When I'm done baking, this bread is nice and done in the center and not burnt on the sides or top. I think the reason for this is because more of this keto bread dough is touching the surface of this pan, so the heat is better distributed as it bakes. After pulsing everything together, my walnut and other ingredient meal is the perfect texture. As you can see here, you'll also feel that the flour is really nice and dry and completely lump-free. All you have to do now is just toss the walnut flour mixture into a mixing bowl, make a small well in the center, then get your bowl with the room temperature egg whites and whisk the egg whites really well with your fork to break up the surface tension of the egg whites, which will make it much easier to combine with the dry ingredients. Okay, pour the whisked egg whites into the mixing bowl and stir until all the ingredients have been incorporated into the egg whites. At this point, you'll notice that it's a little bit more clumpy and very moist. Next step is to get freshly boiled hot water and add your apple cider vinegar to this and stir well to combine. and pour this boiling hot water and vinegar solution into the bowl. To have the best result, it's really important that you use very hot, freshly boiled water and use it immediately. Then, immediately fold this hot boiling water and vinegar solution with the rest of the ingredients, ensuring that all the dry ingredients are well incorporated into the water mixture. Now here's a little bit of a cautionary note. Please don't overfold or overmix, because if you do that, you'll let out most of the gases that the baking soda and baking powder have formed, which are needed in order for this bread to be light and fluffy. If you overwhip, these gases will be released and you'll have a much denser bread. And that's not what we're going with this recipe. We want each slice to be light, tender, and moist. Also, since I'm using a gluten-free combination of ingredients, whatever shape I make my bread in the pan, that's the shape that it will end up when it's baked. It won't really rise that much, and even with yeast, you get very little rise with non-glutinous dough. And if you're interested in this kind of narrow loaf pan, I'll provide a link to one that I found was a really nice heavy gauge and quite a good quality pan. And as soon as you've done this step, transfer the dough into your parchment-lined loaf pan. You don't need to pre-shape the dough or anything. Just gently place and distribute the dough into the pan like this. Also, as you're transferring the dough, don't press it down with your spatula. Just layer it very gently. Once you have added all the dough to the pan, use your fingers or a spatula and very gently shape the top to even it out. As I mentioned earlier, whatever shape you put into the pan will be the shape of your finished bread. Now the next step is to get your melted butter and, using your pastry brush, coat the entire surface of the dough and use up all the melted butter. You don't have to do this, but if you like, sprinkle chopped walnuts over the surface and then very gently just press the walnut pieces so that they stick into the dough and won't fall off when you're cutting the bread. The last step you have to do before putting the loaf pan in the oven is to make 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter deep diagonal incisions into the surface of this bread. The reason I make these cuts is to allow the water vapor to escape as the bread is baking. This will ensure that even the middle part of the bread has been done and is not left moist or damp. Now, place the pan in the middle position of your preheated oven and set the timer for 40 to 45 minutes. When your timer goes off, test your loaf with a toothpick to make sure that the center is nicely done. If it's not, give it only 5 more minutes. And when you decide your bread is done, just turn off the heat. Place a rolled up oven mitt or tea towel in order to keep the oven door slightly open. By doing this, this will allow the bread to cool more slowly and not to fall or droop in the center of the bread. Leave the bread in the oven for just 20 minutes, not longer, because you'll overbake. Now the bread is done, so take it out of the oven. Lift it out of the pan and peel off the parchment paper. Because this is a keto bread and not a glutinous bread, place the loaf on a cooling rack and let the bread rest until it is completely cooled to room temperature. When you're ready to serve, just cut the bread into 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeter thick slices. You'll find that this moist and tasty bread is very satiating, so you really don't need thick slices. And to just tempt you with a few ideas and to let you know how we use this bread, we find that this bread goes perfectly with many sandwich fixings. These are some of our favorites. I really love the combination of taste of the classic tuna salad because the nutty flavor of the walnut is a perfect complement for the tuna salad. Or one of the other things that we really love is to make my authentic guacamole. All of us feel is so good that it's actually more of a treat than a meal. Or check out my open-faced sandwich ideas that I've demonstrated in my keto falafel flatbread video. And these flavors are so amazing together. The links for all of these sandwich fixings, as well as any other videos I've mentioned, and the link for the written printable keto walnut bread recipe, all links are in the description below, so please check it out. As I mentioned, my family and I really love the suggestions I've made for sandwich spreads, but for now, I'll just use a little bit of this nice, fresh, tasty butter and spread it on a piece. This bread smells amazing and also has a great mouthfeel because it's moist and soft. I think I need another bite. as I mentioned in my first walnut bread, and I've had many people agree with this comment, the original walnut bread, and I'm sure you'll find that this walnut bread is really addictive. So be good and do portion control. For now, I hope that you'll like this recipe. Thank you very much for watching my keto walnut bread video. Please share the link to this video or any of my other videos with a friend or family member that you think might want a healthier but still very tasty recipe. And if you're new to my channel, I would be honored and delighted if you would subscribe. Most of all, I hope that you'll come back and check out my next video when it's posted. Until then, have a wonderful day and cheers.